What does the coldest man in Somerset do when he finds a woman knee-deep in creek mud? Laughing, not crying, not calling for help, laughing. He had two choices, ride away and forget her, or get off his horse. He got off his horse, and nothing about his life was ever the same again. Stay with us. This one is worth it. The gate at the back of Foxcroft Cottage had three enemies: rain, cold mornings, and Sarah Foxcroft. She stood in front of it, basket on her arm, jaw set, and lifted the latch the way it needed to be lifted. Up, then sideways, then a sharp push with the heel of her hand. The gate swung open with a grudging creak, like a man who has lost an argument and has not forgiven it. Every morning, she told it. The gate said nothing. She walked down the hill toward Merrow Creek. The path was familiar in the way only childhood paths are, known by body, not by mind, the feet finding it before the eyes do. The air was cold and smelled of wet leaves and distant wood smoke, and the creek was audible before it was visible, its voice rising through the trees, low and continuous like someone talking quietly to themselves. She pushed through the last branch, stepped onto the bank, and the ground took her, not violently, gently almost. The recent rains had softened the bank inward, and what looked like solid earth was 3 inches of calm and 1 foot of surrender. Her right boot went into the ankle. She shifted her weight. It went into the calf. She tried to pull it free. The mud held on. She stood very still. She looked at her leg. She looked at the basket in her hand. She looked at the pocket of plum cake she had been planning to deliver to Mrs. Plum, but had already begun reconsidering. And she laughed. Not a polite laugh, not the kind that ladies produced in drawing rooms, small and covered and quickly forgotten. This was the other kind, the kind that climbed up from somewhere deep and moved through her whole chest, filling the valley with sound, sending 2 starlings up from the willow tree across the bank in a burst of startled wings. She laughed because it was absurd, because she had walked this path 200 times, because the mud had been waiting here all along and she had simply not noticed, which was exactly the sort of thing the world did without asking. She laughed because she had learned in the years since her father died and the money got tight and Margaret started going quietly grey at the temples from worry. She had learned that when life put you in the mud, the only sensible response was to find it funny before it found you first. She tried again to pull her foot free. The mud tightened. She laughed harder. It was that laugh, carrying up through the cold valley air, past the stone wall that divided Foxcroft land from the edge of Ashbourne Park, that Lysander Halcourt heard from the back of his horse. He had not meant to come this way. He turned without thinking at the stone wall, following an old path his horse remembered better than he did, and now he was at the valley's edge, listening. He did not hear crying. He did not hear shouting. He heard laughter. He pulled the horse to a halt. Lysander Halcourt, 6th Duke of Ashbourne, was not a man who stopped for things. He had spent 31 years cultivating the particular quality of forward motion that a large estate required, the capacity to move through the day without being arrested by every detail, every sound, every small distraction that life offered. He had learned this young, at his father's knee, from a man who had held 6,000 acres together by never once letting the acres know he was afraid. He had become very good at forward motion. He did not move. He sat on his horse and listened to a woman laugh herself breathless somewhere below the tree line and felt something happen in his chest. Not a dramatic thing, not a lurch or a thunder. Something quieter, the way a fire shifts when you add a single log, not bigger, just different. Warmer in a direction it had not been warm before. He told himself it was curiosity. He pressed his heel to the horse's flank and started down. He saw her before she saw him. She was standing in the mud at the creek's edge, right leg swallowed past the calf, basket held aloft with the instinctive resolve of someone determined to save at least something. Her pale blue pelisse was losing a battle with the bank. Her dark hair had pulled loose on one side, a curl falling forward across her cheek, and she was laughing. Still laughing, now making a series of experimental attempts to free herself, each one achieving nothing except sinking her further and producing a fresh wave of amusement, as if she were watching someone else make all the wrong choices and finding it the best entertainment of the week. He watched for too long. He was aware of this. He noted it with the same cool precision with which he noted most things, and he did something about it. He dismounted, tied his horse to a branch, and walked toward the creek. She heard him in the leaves. The laughter stopped. She turned. They looked at each other. Her eyes were dark and completely unafraid, and that, more than anything else about this moment, was what held him. He was the Duke of Ashbourne. People did not look at him like that. They looked at him carefully or respectfully, or with the particular frozen expression of someone deciding in real time how worried they should be. They did not look at him the way this woman looked at him, openly, directly, like a person reading a sign at a crossroads and making an unhurried decision. She looked him over, top to bottom, decided something. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was warm, steady, and still full of laughter, just below the surface, the way heat stays in stone hours after the sun moves on. He looked at her leg, at the mud consuming it. "Are you?" he said. "Quite well." She appeared to consider this as a genuine question. "Perfectly well," she said. Somewhat stationary, though. He stood at the firm edge of the bank and assessed the problem the way he assessed all problems, quietly, efficiently, without wasted motion. "Don't move sideways," he said. "I had reached the same conclusion," she said. "If you give me your hand, I can pull you free." "That," she said, "would be very kind." He removed his glove, tucked it in his coat, tested his footing, pressing his boot into the bank's edge twice before committing his weight, and extended his hand. She took it. His hand was warm. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected anything in particular, but if she'd been asked, she might have guessed cold, and the warmth of his palm registered as a small surprise, the kind that is neither important nor forgettable. He pulled. The mud let go with a sound she could only describe as catastrophically undignified. A long sucking shook that echoed off the low banks, startled the starlings back into the air for the second time that morning, and achieved somehow the sensation of being applauded by the entire creek. She stumbled forward onto solid ground, caught her balance, and stood up straight. Her boot was intact. Her pelisse was not. She looked down at herself. "Well," she said. He was still holding her hand. He became aware of this, released it, not abruptly but with a deliberate, controlled movement, the kind that came from a man who had learned to manage every small action so that none of them got away from him. She felt the absence of the warmth. She noted it. She filed it away. "Thank you," she said, genuinely. "It was nothing," he said. The words were correct. The tone, she noticed, was not dismissive. It was more careful than that. "I'm Sarah Foxcroft," she said. "Foxcroft Cottage over the hill. My father was Captain Foxcroft. He served with Colonel Wentworth." Something moved in his expression, the name landing. "I know of Colonel Wentworth," he said. "Your father. He passed some years ago." "Yes," she said. No softening around it, just the fact. He nodded once, not socially. The nod of someone who has walked through that territory and is not going to pretend it is anything other than what it is. She found she liked him for that. "I am Halcourt," he said. "Not the Duke of, just the name bear." "I know," she said. "This is your creek." "The bank is mine," he said. "The water belongs to no one." She tilted her head. "That is a philosophically generous position for a landowner." The corner of his mouth moved. It was so small she almost missed it. The faintest pressure of muscles that had not yet committed to a smile. The idea of one, surfacing and submerging before it could arrive. But she had seen it start. She would remember that. "May I," he said, looking at her ruined pelisse, "offer to have that laundered by the Ashbourne staff? It is, technically, my bank." She looked down. The pelisse had, at this point, a relationship with mud that was older and more complex than any laundry could address. "We have an understanding, this coat and I," she said. "I appreciate the offer." He looked at her, not the way people usually looked at her, assessing rank, calculating utility, deciding where to file her. He looked the way someone looks when they have encountered something they do not yet have a category for and are not in a hurry to invent one. "I'll walk you to the path," he said. She didn't ask why, neither did he explain. They walked. She walked fast. He matched her without comment. The creek ran alongside them, low and cold and unhurried, and the autumn light came through the willows in long thin blades, pale and clean, and she said, because she was thinking it, and had never quite learned to stop herself from saying what she was thinking. "It sounds different in autumn, heavier somehow, like it has more to say." He looked at the water. He was quiet. Then, I've ridden past this creek for 15 years and never noticed that. You ride, she said. I walk. Is that a criticism? It's an observation, she said. Criticism would have had a sharper ending. The corner of his mouth did the thing again. The almost smile. She caught it. They reached the stone wall. He lifted the latch, easily, without the three-step argument it required at her gate, and held it for her. She stepped through, turned back. The loose curl was still against her cheek. She did not fix it. She looked at him over the wall with those dark, unafraid eyes, and she said, "Thank you for finding me, Mr. Halcourt. The mud was beginning to win." He said nothing. She smiled, full and unguarded, the kind that had nothing performed in it at all, and walked up the hill. He stood at the wall. He stood there for longer than made sense. Then he walked back to his horse, mounted, and rode toward Ashbourne House. He thought about her the entire way home. He told himself he wasn't. He was. The letter sat on the corner of his desk for 11 days. His mother's handwriting on the seal, small, controlled, the same script she had used since before he was born. He knew what it said without opening it. The season was approaching. There was a house party at Kelmore in November. Lady Constance Whitmore would be there. Did he intend to continue disappointing everyone indefinitely, or had he perhaps reconsidered? He had not reconsidered. He moved the letter to the left side of the desk. "The Greywell tenancy," said Pa. "Address it." Pa made a note. "Lord Beauchamp's invitation to the Briarfield hunt." "No. He has asked 3 times this season, Your Grace." "Then he should stop asking." Pa made another note, with the expression of a man who has learned to write things down without editorializing. A footman appeared in the doorway. New, hired last month, still finding his way around the house's rhythms. "The Kelmore steward is here about the south fence, Your Grace. He says it's—" "Tell him I'll send someone Thursday," Lysander said without looking up. The footman didn't move. Lysander looked up. The footman straightened sharply, turned, and left at twice the pace he'd arrived. Pa said nothing. He had learned, in 6 years of service, that silence was the correct response to approximately 80% of things. Lysander returned to the correspondence. He signed 3 letters, declined a dinner invitation, approved a timber purchase for the North Barn. At 10:30, Pa said goodnight and left. The house went quiet. Lysander remained at the desk. He did not immediately leave, though there was nothing more requiring his attention. He sat with the last letter half folded in his hand and listened to the house settle. The small sounds of an old building at rest, timber and stone breathing in the cold, the distant click of a door somewhere in the servants' corridor. Sounds he had heard every night of his life in this house, and had never once found anything but ordinary. Tonight they felt, for no reason he could fully account for, like the sounds of a place that was very quiet, because it had always been very quiet, and had simply never had occasion to notice. He put down the letter. He went to the window. The valley was dark below the grounds, the creek invisible in the trees, the whole of the south meadow lying under a cold, clear sky that showed every star with the relentless clarity of late autumn. He knew that valley. He knew it the way he knew his accounts, by number, by boundary, by legal description. He knew where the soil changed, and where the drainage failed, and which fields needed what. He had never, he realized, walked it in the dark. He had never walked it in the morning and noticed the way it sounded heavier in autumn. He had never stopped at the far meadow and looked at the wildflowers that apparently grew there every year, in defiance of all reasonable expectation. You ride. I walk. He pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. He was 31 years old, and the master of 6,000 acres, and he had spent this evening unable to stop thinking about a woman he had met twice. Once, while she was stuck in a creek bank, and once, while she was buying apples, and this was not, by any rational measure, a situation that merited the amount of attention he was giving it. He told himself this. He told himself that what he felt was nothing more than the novelty of encountering someone who did not treat him like a title. That novelty wore off. It always wore off. He had enough experience of the world to know that the things that felt unlike anything else were usually, on closer examination, exactly like everything else, and that the feeling of difference was simply the feeling of not yet knowing something well enough to recognize its category. He told himself all of this with considerable firmness. Then he looked at the valley, dark and quiet under the stars, and thought about the way the creek sounded heavier in autumn, and could not for the life of him work out what category that belonged to. He went to bed. He did not sleep well. In the morning he rode out early, earlier than usual, and at the stone wall, without deciding to, he turned toward the valley. Outside the study window, the grounds of Ashbourne House stretched in perfect maintained order. The gravel paths raked, the topiary trimmed to their correct shapes, the hedges aligned with a precision that had nothing accidental in it. He had always found the grounds calming. Order in the visible world made everything else slightly more manageable. "Pa," he said, "Your Grace." "The Foxcroft Cottage, North Meadow lease." Pa produced the relevant paper with the efficiency of a man who keeps everything to hand. "Up for renewal in December, standard terms." "Renew it," Lysander said. "Full term, no adjustment." Pa's pen paused for exactly half a second. "Of course," he said, and wrote it down. She was testing an apple for firmness when she heard her name. Not Miss Foxcroft, just her name. The way someone says it who has been thinking it and then found themselves 3 feet away before they had quite decided to be. She turned. He was standing at the edge of the baker's stall, riding gloves in one hand, having apparently crossed the market square while she was focused on fruit. He looked, in the grey morning light, exactly as he had at the creek, controlled, contained, the dark riding coat, the jaw that was set against something. He also looked, she noticed, slightly uncertain, not in the way of a man who did not know what he was doing. In the way of a man who knew exactly what he was doing and had not finished deciding whether he should. "Mr. Halcourt," she said, evenly. She had practiced it once in the mirror that morning, and she was not going to apologize for that. "Miss Foxcroft." He looked at the apple in her hand. "How do you do?" "Very well," she said. "No mud today." "Firm ground," he said. A beat. "I was speaking with Mr. Hatch," he said. "His eastern field at it floods every second autumn. I am told the problem may be the old culvert by the mill." She looked at him. "My father surveyed that culvert for 7 years. He kept notes." Something sharpened in his expression, focused. "I would value seeing them," he said. "I'll have them sent to the house," she said. "Or—" He stopped. She waited. "If you were willing to explain them yourself," he said. "The notes would mean more with your father's knowledge behind them." She turned the apple over in her hand, looked at it. "You ride the land," she said. "Every survey my father made, he did on foot. The culvert, the floodlines, the silt patterns, you cannot see those things from a horse." He was quiet. "Would you walk it with me?" she asked. "I'll bring the notes. You'll see what he saw." He looked at her for a moment that lasted slightly longer than a market square exchange required. "Yes," he said. They fell into walking the creek on Tuesdays. Neither of them officially declared this. It simply became true. The way things become true when two people keep showing up at the same place, at the same time, and stop pretending it is accidental. She brought the notes. He asked questions, real ones, the kind that followed the logic and caught the implications, not the performance of interest. She learned that he was sharper than he appeared, and that he appeared, already, quite sharp. He learned where the silt shifted after heavy rain, what the soil color meant where the drainage changed, why the old mill race needed clearing every 3 years. And then, slowly, they stopped talking only about the culvert. She showed him the Kingfisher Bank. He did not see a kingfisher, but he looked with the careful attention of a man who was genuinely trying, which she found, the trying, more affecting than the finding would have been. He showed her the far meadow, beyond the stone wall, where wildflowers grew in late autumn in defiance of all reasonable expectation, small and pale and quietly insistent against the grey-gold light. She stopped walking when she saw them. "I didn't know these were here," she said. "They're here every year," he said. "I ride past." A pause. "I've never stopped." She turned to look at him. He was already looking at her. Sarah put the apples on the kitchen table with the focused precision of someone whose mind was doing something large and whose hands needed something small to do. Margaret poured tea, said nothing, waited. She had 2 years on Sarah and a great deal more patience. She had learned that rushing her sister's thoughts was like rushing the gate. It only made things harder. "I spoke with the Duke again today," Sarah said. Margaret sat down. "He asked me to walk the creek with him," Sarah said, to show him father's survey notes for the culvert. "That is very sensible," Margaret said. "It is." "And nothing else is happening?" Sarah looked at her tea. "He almost laughed at me twice," she said. "Once at the creek and once at the market. He stopped himself both times, you can see it, the moment it almost happens, and then the moment he puts it away." She turned the cup in her hands. "It's like watching someone reach for something and then remember they're not supposed to want it." Margaret was quiet. Outside the window, the garden was grey and still. "Sarah," she said, "he is a duke. I know. His world has a shape. You do not fit the shape." "I know that too." "And you are going on Tuesday anyway." Sarah looked up. "Yes," she said. Margaret looked at her for a long moment. "Wear the green police," she said finally. "The blue one has mud on it." She brought the folder herself. She had meant to send it through the gate. A clean exchange, papers, receipt done. Practical. But standing at the Ashbourne tradesman's entrance with her father's handwriting on the cover, she found she could not reduce it to an errand. She asked for the Duke. The footman assessed her, police, basket, the calm in her face, and made a decision. She was shown to the anteroom off the hall. 2 chairs, a writing table, a fire that had been burning long enough to warm the room but not so long as to make it stuffy. She sat and looked at the folder in her lap. Merrow Creek, Eastern Culvert. Drainage surveys 1801, 1808. 7 years. Every autumn, every spring, every time the water changed. Her father walking the bank alone, recording it all in that small, precise hand. Measurements and observations, and sometimes, in the margins, small things that had nothing to do with drainage. A fox at the mill gate. Ice forming on the eastern stones earlier than the year before. The kingfisher returned. Good omen. She heard his footsteps in the corridor. The door opened. Miss Foxcroft. He stopped, not surprised exactly, recalibrating. "I thought you would send—" "They're my father's," she said, simply. He understood that in one beat. "Of course," he said, and sat in the other chair, not behind the desk, not across the table. The chair beside her, close enough to look at the papers together. She spread them out and explained. She was good at this, walking someone through a complicated thing without making it simple, finding the path through it and noting what to look at. She went through the surveys one by one, where the silt built up, how the flood patterns shifted over 7 years, what her father had recommended and why. He leaned forward over the pages and followed every line of it. His finger moved across the survey map, tracing the creek's curve, the flood markings, the culvert's position, with a focus that was entirely unperformed. He was not pretending to be interested. He was interested. "Here," she said, pointing, "this is where the problem begins. If you look at 1806, the bend deflects the silt," he said. "It follows the current inward." He looked up. Their faces were close over the table. She hadn't noticed them both leaning in. She did not move back. Neither did he. A second. Suspended, quiet, neither of them breathing quite normally. His eyes were dark, not flat dark. The kind of dark that had depth in it, movement, the way water is dark when it is deep. "Yes," she said. "Exactly." He leaned back, deliberate, the way someone finishes a sentence before turning away from it. "I'll have the culvert surveyed in spring," he said. His voice was steady. She noticed the work in the steadiness. He would have liked that, she said, about her father, plainly. He looked at the marginal notes, read one aloud quietly. "The kingfisher returned to the eastern bank this morning, 3 years since the last sighting. Good omen." He did not speak for a moment. "He watched the birds as well," he said. "He watched everything," she said. "On foot." She said it without the edge it had carried at the market. It landed differently now, not as a challenge, as an inheritance passed across the table in her father's handwriting. "I should like," he said slowly, "to walk the valley as he did, if you were willing to show me." The fire shifted. "Yes," she said. "I would like that very much." "Tell me something," she said. They were in the far meadow, the one with the autumn wildflowers, and the wind had dropped, and the light was the thin gold colour it got in late November, when the sun was low and the world looked like it was remembering summer rather than living in it. "What kind of something?" he said. "Something true," she said. "Not the estate, not the tenancy. Something you think about at night when no one is asking anything of you." He walked beside her. The grass was long and pale. He said after a while, Whether I have become the thing I was trained to be, or whether there was someone else first and before the training, and if so, whether there is any distance left between them. She didn't answer immediately. The wind moved through the grass. "And?" she said. "Some mornings it feels closer than others," he said. "This autumn," he stopped. "Some mornings there is more distance than usual." She understood what he meant, not the words, the shape underneath them, the particular loneliness of a man who had been made into something and no longer knew with certainty if there had been a him before the making. "You almost laughed twice," she said. "You chose not to both times." She glanced at him, but the choice was there. You can only choose against something that exists. He was silent. "I'm not saying this to encourage you toward anything," she said. "I'm just saying that is not nothing." He looked at the flowers. "No," he said, "it is not nothing." They walked on, close enough that their arms almost touched. Neither of them moved away. They did not speak for a while after that. The meadow did not require them to. The wind moved through the pale grass, and the thin gold light shifted slowly across the ground, and it was the kind of quiet that does not ask to be filled, the kind that two people can share without it becoming uncomfortable, which is a rarer thing than most people admit. She had known very few people in her life she could be quiet with. Her father had been one. He used to walk the creek bank without saying anything for 20 minutes at a time, and she had learned early that this was not absence. It was presence of a different kind, a companionable attention to the same things, the world held between two people without either one needing to explain it. She thought about this now, standing beside Lysander Halcourt in a meadow he had never stopped to look at, and she thought, there it is again. That same thing. "My father used to say," she said eventually, not loudly, "that you could not love a place you had not been inconvenienced by." He turned to look at her. "He meant that the days that go wrong are the days you remember," she said. "The fence that breaks, the field that floods, the morning you fall in the creek." She looked at the flowers. He said that inconvenience meant attention, and attention was the beginning of love. Lysander was quiet. "He sounds," he said, "like a man worth knowing." "He was," she said. "He was the kind of man who noticed things, small things. He would have liked you, I think." She paused. "He would have asked you questions you didn't know how to answer yet." "What kind of questions?" She looked at him. "Whether you had been properly inconvenienced," she said. "Whether you had paid enough attention to anything to be in danger of loving it." His eyes held hers. The wind moved through the grass between them, slow and cold and unhurried, and somewhere beyond the tree line the creek made its patient sound, and she felt, very clearly, without any remaining uncertainty, that she was in danger. That she had been in danger since the morning in the mud, and that the danger had only grown with every Tuesday, every survey note, every almost laugh she had catalogued, with the careful attention of a woman who had learned from her father that attention was the beginning of love. She was paying a great deal of attention. "I think," Lysander said slowly, as if finding the words in a language he had not spoken in a long time, "that I may have been insufficiently inconvenienced for most of my life." "The culvert will help with that," she said. He looked at her, and this time, for the first time, he smiled. Not the ghost of one, not the almost. A real, small, unhurried smile, there and visible and entirely his own, aimed at nothing except her. She smiled back. And they stood in the November meadow and said nothing more, because nothing more needed to be said, because some things are complete the moment they become visible, and this was one of them. The great hall of Ashbourne House was the warmest it was all year, long tables and good wine and candlelight, the fiddle going in the corner, lords and farmers at the same boards because 200 years of this tradition had made it feel natural, or at least familiar enough to pass. Sarah stood near the window with Mrs. Hatch, and felt him arrive in the room. Not because she was watching the door, she wasn't, but there was a quality of attention that reorganized when he walked in, a small shift in how people held themselves, a half-turn of heads, and she felt it before she saw him. He was across the hall, speaking with his steward, not looking at her. Then he was looking at her. It was brief, a second. He looked away first, back to his steward, back to the conversation. But she had been looked at. Mrs. Hatch was saying something Sarah answered. She had no recollection of what. He crossed the room. She watched it happen, the unhurried path through people, 2 pauses for conversations that needed happening, nothing rushed, nothing pointed. And then he was 3 feet away and the fiddle was playing and the candles were throwing everything warm and uncertain. "Miss Foxcroft," he said. "Your Grace," she said. "There is an old corridor in the east wing," he said. "The portraits, I thought—" He stopped, tried again. "I have been meaning to show you something." Mrs. Hatch, beside her, made a very small sound. "Of course," Sarah said. The corridor was dim and quiet, away from the fiddle's reach. Portraits of previous Halcourts lined the walls, painted faces composed in the careful dignity of men who had held things together through force of will and the refusal to look uncertain. She looked at them. She thought she could see something of him in the jaw of the third, in the eyes of the fourth, something passed down without being spoken. "You wanted to show me the portraits," she said. "No," he said. She turned. He was closer than she expected, not alarmingly close, the kind of close that happens when 2 people have been moving toward the same point for months and have finally arrived there. "I have been thinking," he said, "about what you said, in the meadow, about distance." "So have I," she said. "I have not—" He stopped. His jaw tightened, then released. "I have not allowed myself to want things. For a long time, it seemed simpler. Wanting things meant the possibility of losing them," she said. "Yes, I know that feeling," she said, "after my father. For a whole season I stopped looking forward to anything. I thought it was wisdom." A pause. "It wasn't. It was just making myself smaller to avoid the risk." "How did you stop?" he asked. "I laughed in the mud," she said. "I fell in the creek and I laughed and I thought, there it is. That's still here. Whatever the world took, it didn't take that." He looked at her. In the candlelight in the old corridor, with all his ancestors watching from the walls, something in his expression changed, not dramatically, quietly, the way a lock opens. Not loudly, just differently than a moment before. He reached out, slowly, and took her hand, not pulling, not rescuing, just holding, with both hands, the way he held everything that mattered. She let him. The fiddle played in the great hall. The candles bent in the draught from the far window. She felt his thumb trace once, lightly, across her knuckles. The smallest possible motion, almost nothing. And it meant everything. "Sarah," he said, "her name. Just her name." "I know what the distances are," he said quietly. "I know what people will say. I am not asking you to pretend those things don't exist." "I've never been any good at pretending," she said. "I know," he said. The corner of his mouth moved, warmer this time, fuller. "That is—" A pause. "That is one of very many things." "One of many what things?" she asked. He looked at her, steady, open, more open than she had ever seen him. "Things that have made this autumn," he said, "the first one in memory that I have not wanted to end." She exhaled, slowly. He was still holding her hand. She turned hers over and held his back. The Dowager Duchess arrived from Bath on a Tuesday, which Sarah felt was poetically appropriate, since Tuesdays had become the most important day of her calendar. She was summoned for tea on a Thursday. She wore her best dress, not because she thought it would impress, but because the occasion deserved acknowledgement. She walked to Ashbourne House, was shown to the formal drawing room, blue silk, good fire, the kind of room that had been decided about, and sat opposite a woman with sharp eyes and 30 years more experience of being right. The first 10 minutes were perfectly civil and entirely useless. Then the Dowager set down her cup and said, "My son has not laughed since he was 19 years old. I had begun to believe he had forgotten how." Sarah said nothing. "He laughed last week," the Dowager said. "At dinner, at something Pa said. It was brief. He looked surprised by it himself." She looked at Sarah. "I think you did that." "I don't think I did it," Sarah said. "I think it was already there. I may have made it harder to avoid." The Dowager studied her. "I will not pretend I have no concerns," she said. "I would not respect you if you had none," Sarah said. A pause. "He is not an easy man," the Dowager said. "He will not become one. Whatever you see in him is real, but it comes with the rest of him, the weight of it, the silences. The years he spent turning himself into something that could hold all of this together. She gestured slightly at the house. At the 6,000 acres. At 200 years of responsibility. You cannot love the warmth and be surprised by the walls. I know that, Sarah said. Do you? I've loved complicated things before, Sarah said. I've found it more honest than the simple kind. The dowager looked at her for a long time. Then she picked up the teapot. More tea, she said. Thank you, Sarah said. He asked her in the kitchen on a Friday in December. He had brought the culvert notes, returned as promised, with the originals bound in new leather and fair copies made in Pa's steady hand. He could have sent them. He walked them over himself. Margaret found something urgently requiring her attention in the garden. They stood in the kitchen of Foxcroft Cottage, low ceiling, warm fire, the smell of bread and dried herbs, and she held her father's notes, the margins full of kingfishers and small observations, and a man's quiet love for the place he had walked every week, and he stood in the middle of her kitchen looking entirely, perfectly out of place, in his good dark coat and his Ashbourne bearing, in a room where the chairs didn't match, and the gate argued with you every morning. He looked around the kitchen. He looked at her. I would like to ask your mother's permission, he said, and yours. She looked at him. My mother will agree, she said. She is practical. She has a great respect for good drainage surveys. He looked at her. He laughed. Real. The real one, low and warm and slightly startled. The laugh of a man hearing his own laughter and finding it less foreign than expected. It lasted 4 seconds. It was the most unguarded 4 seconds she had witnessed from him in 3 months of Tuesdays. It was the best thing she had heard all year. Sarah, he said, still with the tail of it in his voice. Yes, she said. I haven't asked yet. I know, she said. I said yes anyway. He crossed the kitchen. He took her face in his hands, both hands with that careful, steady gravity, and he looked at her for one long moment, close, in the winter light from the small cottage window. Then he kissed her. It was not the kiss of a man who had rehearsed it. It was the kiss of a man who had been walking towards something for months and had finally arrived, and who kissed the way he had always held things, with both hands, with full attention, with nothing held back. When it ended, she kept her eyes closed. She was smiling. She could feel herself smiling, and she did not try to stop. The mud, she said quietly. The mud changed everything. The mud, he said just as quietly, changed everything. Outside, somewhere in the winter garden, a bird called once and went silent. She made a note to ask him to find out what kind. He was going to need to start noticing things on foot, and they might as well begin here. She opened her eyes. He was already looking at her. He was, she understood, always going to be already looking at her. The culvert was repaired in March. 3 days of work, several men from the village, Mr. Hatch with his spade and his opinions and his genuine goodwill. When it was done, the eastern meadow drained cleanly for the first time in years, and the creek ran clear and cold over the flat grey stones, and the first green of spring was coming up along the Kingfisher bank in small uncertain tufts. She was there when the work finished. He came down on foot. She heard him coming, the sound of boots in the new grass, unhurried, not the sound of a man who had somewhere more important to be. She turned, and he was walking through the willows at the bend, his coat open to the spring air, and he looked the way she had never imagined the Duke of Ashbourne could look, present, easy, here. He came and stood beside her. They looked at the creek. Different in spring, he said. Lighter, she said, like it's glad. He was quiet. Then, my father died on this bank. Winter. The ground was icy. He fell. A pause. I stopped walking the valley after that. I told myself it was practical to ride. It was easier not to come here. She turned to him. His face was open. No walls up, no careful management of what showed. I'm sorry, she said. I am less afraid of it now, he said. Of being here, of the ground. He looked at her. Of most things. She took his hand. He laced his fingers through hers and held on. The creek ran on, patient and clear. The willow at the bend was leafing out in pale green, and the spring air smelled of water and new earth and the particular freshness of a world that had come through winter and was glad about it. And then In the dry reeds on the far bank, quick and low and impossibly bright, gone in under a second, a flash of blue, green and orange. "Lysander," she breathed. He turned. He had missed it. She started laughing. That laugh, the real one, the one that had floated up this valley on an autumn morning and found its way to a man on a hill who had not known what he was missing until he heard it. And the laughter filled the valley the way it had that first morning, startling the starlings up from the willow tree, carrying through the clean spring air. "What?" he said. "What was it?" "The kingfisher," she managed. "Right there. 1 second. Right on the reed." He stared at the empty bank. His jaw was set in the way it got when he had narrowly missed something irreplaceable and was still deciding how to feel about it. "I was looking at you," he said. She stopped laughing. He had said it plainly, without ceremony. The plain fact of it offered the way her father had offered things in the margins of his notes. The kingfisher returned. Good omen. She looked at him. "It'll come back," she said. "I know," he said. "I intend to be here." She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. They stood like that for a while, her hand in his, the creek running below their feet, the spring morning opening around them, the way spring mornings do when winter has been long, and you have stopped quite believing they will come back. "I want to show you something," she said. She led him upstream along the bank, past the willow at the bend and the flat grey stones where the crossing was, to the place where the bank curved inward, and a shelf of roots and overhanging grass made a kind of natural hollow above the water. She had found it when she was 9 years old. She had never told anyone about it. It had been her place, hers and the creek's, and, in some quiet way she had never tried to name, her father's. She stopped, pointed. In the roots just above the waterline, perfectly camouflaged, a small tunnel of compacted earth, smooth-edged and precise, facing east over the water. A kingfisher's nest. He looked at it. He looked at it for a long time, with the quiet, full attention of a man who was learning what it meant to look at things on foot. "It has always been here," he said. "I think so," she said, "or one very like it. They return to the same places." He crouched down to see it more clearly, his good coat not caring about the wet bank, and she watched him look, watched the particular stillness of him up close to something small and real. And she felt it, the thing her father had described, the thing she had known since the first Tuesday, attention, the beginning of love. He stood up. "Your father knew about this," he said. "I think so," she said. "He never said, but I found a note once in the back of the 1803 survey in the margin, just a small drawing." She smiled. A bird in a nest with a question mark beside it. She looked at the tunnel in the roots. I think he was still hoping. Lysander looked at the nest, then at the creek, then at her. "I owe your father a great deal," he said. "He would say you owe the creek," she said. "He always gave credit to the land." "Then I owe the creek," he said. "And the mud." "Especially the mud," she said. He reached over and tucked the loose curl, the same one, the one that had been escaping since that first autumn morning, back behind her ear, slowly, with 2 fingers. She let him. The creek ran on below them, clear and cold and patient as it had always been, carrying its small ordinary cargo of light and leaves downstream toward the mill and the valley and the world beyond, and the nest sat quiet in the roots, and the morning was entirely still, and Lysander Halcourt stood on the bank of Merrow Creek on a spring morning with his boots wet and his attention fully, finally, irreversibly given, and felt for the first time in as long as he could remember, nothing like a duke at all, just a man on solid ground looking.
I fell into the bank one cold October morning. The mud came up and held me like it knew. I didn't call for help. I laughed at my own falling. And that was when I heard your horse come through. took your glove off slowly, checked your footing, extended one warm hand and pulled me free. I felt the weight of everything you weren't saying, the kind of man who holds things carefully. You ride, I walk, you see the land from far above. I see it at the roots, where the water and the silt tell you everything you need to know about a place worth loving. Come down from your horse, come walk the creek with me. There are things you cannot see from where you've always been. Come down from your horse, let the morning inconvenience you. That's how you learn to love a place. That's how it gets inside of you. My father walked this valley every autumn, every spring. He wrote about the kingfisher, he wrote about small things. He said you cannot love a place you haven't walked through in the rain. You said you'd spent your whole life keeping clean of that kind of pain, but you came down anyway. You came down anyway. Come down from your horse, come walk the creek with me. There are things you cannot see from where you've always been. Come down from your horse, let the morning inconvenience you. That's how you learn to love a place. That's how it gets inside of you. The kingfisher came back this spring.